The sun dipped behind New York's towering skyline, casting the sky in soft shades of orange and gold. Inside a weathered bus, Claire Bennett sat quietly by the window, her thoughts a tangled mess. Beside her, her 9-year-old daughter, Lily, clung to a worn-out teddy bear, her eyes fixed on the passing world. Their journey here had been long, not just in miles but in life. The past year had been a relentless storm for Claire. After her husband's sudden death, everything fell apart: her home, her job, her sense of safety. But the hardest loss wasn't physical. It was the sound of Lily's voice. Since that day, Lily had been silent, as if her words had vanished with her father. Today, they were heading to Harrison Estate, where Claire had just accepted a job as a housekeeper. It wasn't perfect, but it was their only chance to start over. The bus slowed to a stop in front of a massive iron gate. Beyond it, the grand mansion stood, impressive yet oddly cold and lifeless. Claire gently squeezed Lily's hand, trying to reassure her, though she needed the same comfort herself. Neither of them knew this house would change their lives forever. The iron gates creaked open slowly, their heavy groan echoing in the evening air. Claire held Lily's hand as they stepped inside, walking toward Harrison Estate. The mansion loomed before them, grand yet hollow, as if it had once held warmth but lost it long ago. At the entrance, a middle-aged woman with neatly pinned gray hair waited. Mrs. Thompson, the estate's longtime housekeeper, observed them with sharp but not unkind eyes. "Miss Bennett, I'm Thompson. Come inside." Claire nodded and guided Lily through the towering front doors. The moment they stepped in, she felt the weight of silence pressing down on the house. "Mr. Harrison is rarely home in the evenings. You won't see him often. Your duties are simple. Keep the house clean, ensure everything runs smoothly, and—" Mrs. Thompson hesitated before lowering her voice. "Most importantly, do not disturb young Daniel." Claire blinked. Daniel Harrison, the only son of James Harrison, the master of the house. "How old is he?" Claire asked. 10, but he doesn't speak." Claire's breath caught for a moment. She glanced at Lily. Her daughter had been the same way. Mrs. Thompson led them to a modest room reserved for the household staff. "You may rest here. I'll show you your tasks in the morning." Claire set down their bags, feeling a small sense of relief. But before she could fully relax, Lily tugged at her sleeve. The little girl pointed toward the end of the dimly lit hallway, where a boy with jet-black hair stood, half hidden in the shadows. It was Daniel Harrison. The two children stared at each other in silence. Daniel said nothing. He simply watched Lily. His dark eyes were empty, yet filled with unspoken emotions, as if he had just seen a reflection of himself in her. Claire took a cautious step forward, about to speak, but Daniel abruptly turned away and disappeared around the corner. Mrs. Thompson let out a quiet sigh. "He's always like that. No one can get close to him." Claire squeezed Lily's hand, an odd feeling settling in her chest. She knew this was not going to be just a job. The first morning at Harrison Estate unfolded in an eerie silence. As Claire busied herself with chores, Lily quietly drifted away, her small feet carrying her deeper into the long, cold hallways. The doors stretched endlessly, each one hiding a story she didn't yet know. She ran her fingers along the handles, feeling the chill of forgotten secrets beneath her touch. At the very end of the hallway, Lily stopped. A heavy wooden door stood slightly ajar, as if it had been waiting for someone to find it. She hesitated only a moment before pushing it open. Dust filled the air, illuminated by the soft glow of daylight filtering through thick curtains. In the center of the room stood a grand piano, veiled under an old white cloth. Lily approached it, wide-eyed with curiosity. With both hands, she carefully peeled the cloth away, revealing the sleek black and ivory keys beneath. Then, without a second thought, she pressed down on a single key. The note rang out, clear, pure, yet strangely lonely in the vast emptiness. A sharp movement caught her attention. Lily spun around. Daniel Harrison stood in the corner of the room. His eyes were wide, his face pale. He looked startled, almost afraid, as if something had been awakened within him. He took a small step back, his hands clenched into fists at his sides, his gaze locked onto the piano. Lily did not move. She simply stood there, watching him in return. For a brief, fleeting second, they spoke without words. Daniel stiffened, his breath uneven. He stared at Lily, his dark eyes flickering with something unreadable. Recognition? Fear? Longing? For a brief moment, it seemed like he might stay. But then, like a shadow retreating from the light, he took a step back, then another, and then he was gone. Lily remained where she was, a quiet wonder flickering in her eyes. Far away, Claire had no idea that an invisible thread had just been woven between two lost souls. After the incident in the music room, Daniel avoided Lily. He didn't look at her, didn't come near her, but he no longer ignored her presence completely either. Claire noticed. Daniel was no longer just a silent shadow in Harrison State. He was beginning to feel again. But James Harrison was different. "I don't want music in this house." His voice was firm and heavy when Claire entered the library, where he spent most of his evenings. Claire paused, sensing the invisible walls he had built around himself. "Why?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. James turned toward the window, his gaze sharp yet haunted. "Because music reminds me of what I've lost." A long silence stretched between them. "But it could also help you find what's still here," Claire said gently, her eyes drifting toward Daniel, who sat sketching in the garden. James didn't reply, but Claire saw the way his fingers tightened against the desk. The nightmare came for Daniel on a cold winter night. He shot up in bed, breath ragged, tiny hands clutching the blanket. His heart pounded wildly against his chest, the ghost of his dream lingering like a shadow. Without thinking, Daniel ran. His small feet carried him to the only place where he felt safe. The door to Claire and Lily's room swung open. Claire awoke with a start, her eyes widening at the sight of Daniel standing there, trembling from head to toe. Lily stirred beside her mother, her wide eyes full of concern. Before anyone could react, Daniel rushed forward, throwing his arms around Lily. He was shaking uncontrollably, his breath uneven, as if he had just escaped a terrible nightmare. Lily stiffened for only a second, but then, slowly, gently, she raised her hands and rubbed his back. She didn't speak, she couldn't, but she held him tighter, offering comfort in the only way she knew how. Claire felt her throat tighten, emotion welling up inside her. Lily, the girl who had never let anyone in besides her mother, was now holding Daniel, soothing him with the warmth of her embrace. Daniel didn't let go. He buried his face against her shoulder, silent tears falling down his cheeks. Lily didn't pull away. She squeezed him tighter, as if saying, "I understand. I've been afraid too." Claire swallowed hard, kneeling beside them, placing a gentle hand on both their backs. In the dimly lit hallway, James stood, frozen. No longer just two lost children navigating a lonely world. Daniel and Lily had found each other. For the first time, James realized his son was no longer alone. Since that night, everything in Harrison State began to change. Daniel no longer avoided Lily. He never spoke. But every day, when the house settled into its familiar silence, Daniel quietly made his way to the music room, where Lily was already waiting. They didn't need words. Music was their language. At first, Daniel was hesitant. His fingers would barely graze the keys before pulling away. But Lily never laughed, never pressured. She simply waited. Day by day, he grew bolder. His hands no longer hesitated over the keys. One evening, as Lily played beside him, he closed his eyes and let his fingers move freely. The notes came, not from memory, but from feeling. And then, for the first time, Lily laughed. A small, bright sound, like the chime of a delicate bell. Daniel froze. Then, slowly he smiled. From a distance, James watched. He no longer forbade it. At first, he remained an outsider. But over time, he realized he could no longer ignore what was happening before him. One evening, Claire placed a cup of tea on the table beside James as he sat in the library. "You can go into that room if you want." Her voice was soft. James looked at her, hesitation flickering in his eyes. "I don't think I'm ready." Claire didn't push. She understood his pain, because she had lived it herself. She sat across from him, her fingers tightening around the warmth of her tea. Have you ever felt like the world just moved on without you? Her voice was barely above a whisper. James stilled. No one had ever asked him that. Every day, he admitted, for the first time sounding tired. She left, but everything else, work, life, it just kept going without her. Claire nodded. She understood. I lost my husband in an accident. Her voice faltered slightly. One moment he was holding my hand. The next I was standing alone at the hospital, staring at a doctor who couldn't meet my eyes. She let out a shaky breath. No warning, no time to say goodbye, and all I could do was watch his life continue moving forward without him. James was silent, but for the first time, the coldness in his gaze softened. Claire gave a small, sad smile. You know what hurt the most? Realizing that I didn't just lose my husband, but Lily lost her voice. James stared at her. She hasn't spoken since then. Claire shook her head, as if she was afraid that if she did, the world would shatter all over again. Something in James shifted. Daniel was the same. Two lost souls, each carrying a different grief, finally saw pieces of themselves in each other. From then on, James began to change. He no longer avoided music. At night, he sat closer to the music room, listening to the melodies Daniel and Lily played. One evening, as Claire passed the library, she saw James standing just outside the music room, a strange softness in his eyes. Do you want to go in? She asked. James didn't answer, but this time, instead of turning away, he stepped inside. Claire smiled faintly, knowing that this was the moment James finally began to face his past. Music had become a part of Harrison Estate. Every afternoon, Daniel and Lily sat by the piano, slowly searching for their own melodies. At first, their notes were scattered, hesitant, but as time passed, they flowed together, like pieces of a story waiting to be told. James no longer watched from a distance. One evening, he stepped into the music room, his hand brushing lightly against the polished surface of the piano, as if touching a memory he had tried to bury for too long. Claire sat nearby, quietly observing. You miss her a lot, don't you? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. James didn't look up, but he nodded. She was everything to me. Claire understood. She knew the feeling, the pain of losing a part of yourself and being powerless to bring it back. You haven't really lost her, she said softly. She's still here, in every note Daniel plays. James took a deep breath. For the first time, he didn't run from his pain. That night, a nightmare pulled Daniel from his sleep. He bolted upright, his breath ragged, heart pounding against his ribs. Without thinking, Daniel ran to the music room, as if it were the only safe place he had left. James heard the hurried footsteps and rushed after him. When he arrived, Daniel was already at the piano, his small hands trembling over the keys. Claire and Lily stood nearby. No one spoke. They simply waited. And then, in the quiet of the night, Daniel played. The music wasn't perfect. It wasn't even structured. But every note carried something raw. Fear, pain, and a desperate longing to be free. James couldn't hold back anymore. He moved forward, kneeling in front of his son. Daniel, his voice cracked. You're safe. I'm here. Daniel hesitated. His eyes glistened with tears. He looked at his father for a long time before, for the first time in years, he spoke. Dad. James broke down. Without hesitation, he pulled Daniel into his arms, holding him tightly, as if letting go meant losing him all over again. Lily watched, silent tears rolling down her cheeks. Claire knelt beside her daughter, squeezing her tiny hand. And then another miracle happened. Lily's lips parted, her voice small but clear. Mom. Claire froze. Her heart shattered and mended all at once. She pulled Lily into her arms, sobbing. Both children had found their voices again. In that quiet room, beneath the gentle glow of the night, two broken families became whole once more. The next morning, the sun rose earlier than usual. Golden rays spilled to the grand windows of Harrison Estate, no longer casting shadows, but filling the house with warmth. In the music room, Daniel sat at the piano, Lily beside him. For the first time, the two children played a song together, one they had created themselves. James stood by the door, listening. His eyes were no longer cold. Instead, they shone with quiet pride and peace. Claire stepped up beside him. "Are you ready to move forward?" she asked. James looked at her, then at his son. For the first time in years, he nodded. "I think I've finally found what truly matters." Claire smiled softly. She didn't ask what that was, because she already knew. James turned to her, holding her gaze. "And you, Claire, are you ready to start again?" Claire's fingers tightened around the fabric of her dress. She thought about the past, the grief, the loss, and then about the present where she now stood. Her eyes landed on Lily, laughing as she played the piano. She took a deep breath. "Yes, I think I am." Harrison Estate, once silent and hollow, was now filled with music, laughter, and most importantly, voices that had once been lost. The dawn had arrived, and a new beginning had truly begun. 1 year later, spring had returned to Harrison Estate. The lush green trees swayed gently in the breeze, and a sweet scent of blooming flowers filled the garden. No longer cold and lifeless, the estate was now filled with warmth, laughter, and music. In the music room, Daniel and Lily sat together at the grand piano. There was no hesitation, no silence, just two children who had found their voices again. "Let's play this one." Lily pointed excitedly at a sheet of music. Daniel nodded, his eyes gleaming. "Okay, but don't play too fast this time." Claire stood at the door, quietly watching. Her heart swelled with joy at the sight of the two children chatting, as if they had never been trapped in silence. She turned to James, who stood beside her, his expression softer than she had ever seen. "Are you ready to move forward?" Claire asked gently. James looked at her, then at his son, Daniel, who had once been lost in his own world, but was now laughing beside Lily. He took a deep breath before slowly nodding. "I think I've finally found what truly matters." Claire smiled, her eyes shimmering with happiness. James held her gaze for a long moment. Then, suddenly, he dropped to one knee. Claire gasped as he pulled out a ring. Simple yet beautiful. "Claire, life is full of loss, but it's also full of miracles. You, Daniel, Lily, you all brought that miracle into my life. I want to continue this story with you as a real family. Will you marry me?" Tears of joy welled in Claire's eyes. She glanced at Daniel and Lily, who were beaming with excitement. "Say, yes, Mom. We'll always be together." Lily giggled. "Yeah, and I want to call her Mom, too," Daniel added eagerly, making Claire laugh through her tears. Claire knelt down, her hands trembling, but her heart had never been more certain. She looked up at James, her eyes glistening with something new, not just love, but hope. "Yes, James, because for the first time in a long time, I believe in tomorrow." Harrison Estate, once a house of sorrow and silence, had become a true home, filled with love, laughter, and happiness. A new family had truly been born.